Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber, and alongside me is Logan Camden, and it is Sunday night, so you already know the drill. We are going to be breaking down all of today's action, that being the Week 15 NFL action, and we're going to start not with the Sunday night game, because let's be honest, that was not a very good game. We're going to start with the game of the day on paper, the most important game of the day, that being the Buffalo Bills taking down the Detroit Lions 48-42, the highest scoring game of the season, over 1,000 yards of total offense between these two teams, and a huge win for Buffalo. So, Logan, I say we just cut straight to the chase. Are you looking at Buffalo as the Super Bowl favorite after this win?
No, I'm probably not. I probably still love Kansas City, man. I still think that's the final stage. The one thing I can't argue any longer is that I don't think there's anybody playing better football on the planet right now than Josh Allen. I think I can confidently say that. I think he's the best quarterback in football, and I think he's also the best player in football, period, right now.
Cool.
And I don't think it's close. You know, I don't know if Mahomes would be the second quarterback that I even point to, right? I think I would go to probably Lamar and then Joe Burrow next in terms of the guys that are playing the best football at the position right now. And
right. Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah, sure. No,
so when you say that Josh is the best dude, do you mean he's the dude who's playing the best right now only?
Yeah.
Or do you also mean he's the dude you would take for a playoff run? Okay, you're saying just he's playing the best right now.
I would still take Patrick
We'll
Mahomes.
get you to phase 2 next week.
Oh, okay. We'll see.
Or by the end of the playoffs. We'll get there.
I mean, there is a chance. Like, don't get me wrong. Mahomes did get injured in this game, right? So that could throw a wrench into Kansas City's plans. But I would still take Mahomes, and I think I'd still take Kansas City as my front runner. But it gives the Bills an opportunity to beat anybody they run into. And the reason I say that Allen is by far the best player in the world right now is I think we're getting the apex version of Josh Allen. I think last year kind of gets glossed over a little bit. In terms of Josh's career, it was a phenomenal year last year. I thought he should have been second in MVP voting behind Lamar, and he wasn't perfect, right? Josh led the NFL in turnovers last season, and I think that got maybe a little bit overblown during the discourse last year, but it is a fact. But this season, he's eradicated turnovers and negative plays. He's phenomenal protecting the football. He's also great at limiting sacks. He's the number one in fewest sacks per game, and he's been efficient and explosive, right? He's been limiting those plays, but he's still been giving you that Josh Allen kind of pop. And he's number 5 in total yards per game by a QB. He's number 3 in total touchdowns. I think some of the numbers may indicate that Lamar is playing better football right now, but I don't think that's the case. I think that he's got the signature win in football this year with their win over Kansas City. And I think there have been moments, I don't think all of them you can put on Lamar's shoulders. Every big moment, it's felt like Josh Allen has delivered. And that, to me, was the tiebreaker when I'm thinking about the best player in football. It is close, I think, between him and Lamar. Carson. You tell me if you think differently. But in the biggest moments, I think we've seen Lamar come up just a little bit short when I think Josh has delivered for the most part. Even in a loss last week, right? Josh plays basically flawless football in that game. I mean, I think that's still probably the quarterback performance of the year when we're looking at it individually. And I don't know, Carson, when we're looking at receipts, man, I still remember there were some people that said before the year, the players voted this was the most overrated player in football.
Oh, yeah.
And over a year ago, I still remember there were people saying that they would take Tua over Josh. So we didn't forget, but I think Josh is the best player in football right now.
I think he is too. I think he's the best quarterback in football, and not just saying that he's had the best season. He's the dude who I would want even over Patrick Mahomes. I think he's playing at a supernatural level right now. And it's basically because of what you identified. This is a Josh who is smarter than he's ever been, who's more in control than he's ever been. The Buffalo Bills have the fewest turnovers in football this season, Logan. The Buffalo Bills have the lowest sack rate in football. That is Josh Allen literally doing a better job of eliminating negative plays in terms of both sacks and turnovers than any other quarterback in football, while also still being capable of performances like we saw last week and like we saw today, where it's, yes, he's executing within structure at an extremely high level, but also he's just doing utterly superhuman stuff. Like this season, he's had the shortest average time to throw of his career, but this week he had the longest average time to throw of anybody in football. And some of the scrambling that we saw was out of this world. And I'm not just talking about scramble runs. I'm talking about scrambling to throw, especially because in that first half with Ty Johnson on several occasions, he just made exceptional plays. I mean, there's the one on third down where I would guess he probably held on to the ball for about 10 seconds and was able to just whip this throw across his body. And then he had maybe the throw of the year to Keon Coleman, where he's rolling out to his right. He launches that ball 60 yards as he's taking a hit on the money. So it was an incredibly special performance. I said last week that I thought he had the quarterback performance of the year against the Rams. I thought he was better this week because against the Rams, he had to just take on this superhuman load where the Bills had 21 total yards from scrimmage that were not gained by Josh Allen, either through the air or on the ground. And he was fighting an uphill battle that entire game. But there were a couple of throws that he missed, as much incredible stuff as he did. This game, he was perfect. I mean, he was incredibly accurate, and he was just out of this world with the play extension stuff. And it was drive after drive after drive. You knew you were going to get points up on the board. I mean, the Bills should have been going into the halftime break in this game with 8 straight touchdown drives. Like, it's just unfathomable what Josh has been doing offensively, what this team has been doing offensively. And I think he's having one of the greatest quarterback seasons ever now. And by the way, I think Lamar Jackson is too. And we'll get to the MVP conversation a little bit later in the show, but they're both playing at that extraordinarily high level. I do prefer Josh. I do trust Josh more in a playoff setting. And I think he's at one of the highest quarterback peaks that we've ever seen. And the heater that he is on right now, dude, over his last 4 games, Josh is averaging 336 total yards per game. He's got 16 total touchdowns. He's got 1 turnover. He's taken 0 sacks, and the Bills are averaging 39 yards per game, and they're converting over 54% of their third downs. And that's another one of Josh's superpower, right? Third downs, red zone, fourth downs. They're 14 of 16 this year. There's nobody better in football. And in back-to-back weeks, this is incredible. The Bills just became the 38th and then the 39th team with 42 plus points, 8 plus yards per play, and 0 turnovers in a game. That's only happened 39 times in NFL history. Obviously, no other team has ever done it twice within the same season. The Bills just did it in consecutive weeks. And now they're scoring 32 points per game on the year. And I love this Bills offense coming into this year. And I really like the Amari Cooper trade. And my take before the year is they're going to be a top 5 offense no matter what, because they have Josh Allen and people are overstating the Diggs loss and all of these things. But the level they're playing at right now, I couldn't have even anticipated, because they're the best offense in the league right now. The Lions are incredible, but what the Bills have been doing in this recent stretch, they have 8 straight games with 30 or more points. It's incredible. And I think that's not just about Josh, although he obviously is by far the most important component of this equation. I thought this game also really showed you the depth of the Bills' weapons, especially now that they're healthy again, because Kincaid had been out. He's back in this game. Keon Coleman had been out. He's back in this game. The dude who I want to shout out the most is Ty Johnson, because he is a truly excellent receiving back, and he's mostly been the Bills' third down back, but he is a really good route runner out of the backfield. He's a really good ball tracker. He's got really good hands. He was their leading receiver by far in this game. And the Bills have been led in receiving yards by 6 different players in different games this year. And by the way, not among those 6 players are Amari Cooper or Dalton Kincaid. You got Ray Davis in there twice. You got Matt Collins in there. You got Dawson Knox. You got Ty Johnson today. So I just think it's a testament to, again, the depth of this group of weapons, but also the fact that Josh is just finding whoever is open no matter what. And there's no pressure to force the ball to any one player. And I think it's made this offense better than ever. I think he's the smartest he's ever been. I think that this is the deepest group of weapons he's had when they're healthy. And I also think this is the best offensive coach that he's had. I think Joe Brady has also done a phenomenal job of drawing dudes open. I thought he had an exceptional play call on 4th and 2 to scheme Ty Johnson open for a big gain. And I do want to give credit to Sean McDermott for going for it there at midfield, because previously Sean might not have done that. And I think he has finally come around to the fact that putting the ball in your best player's hands, in my opinion, the best player in the world right now, it's a good decision. And it's worked for the Bills 90% of the time this year when they've done it on 4th down. But Brady's really good, and this offensive line is the best that he's had. Like, I think a lot of the avoiding sack stuff you have to credit Josh for, because I believe he also has the lowest pressure to sack percentage. So when he does get pressured, he's better at avoiding sacks. But he's also got a good offensive line in front of him that does a good job of keeping him in relatively clean pockets. So I do think the Bills are the Super Bowl favorite for me right now. I just think this offense is playing at such a special level. They're averaging 35 points per game. I do think it's a balanced offense. I think they're incredibly complete, and there's nobody that I trust more than Josh Allen in the world. There's nobody who's playing better. The only question about this team really is the defense. Tyler Bass misses a field goal in this game. Yes, that's a question. Sean McDermott frustrates me, but like just in terms of which side of the ball, this offense I trust more than anybody. This defense is inconsistent. And I actually thought that they started this game playing some really good football. I thought the defensive line in the first half played as well as they have all year. Ed Oliver in particular was really, really good, and they were getting good pressure against what's probably the best offensive line in football that Detroit has. And they were keeping the run game totally in check. And really, Detroit didn't run for much yardage at all in this game, which is really surprising considering how much the Bills' run defense has struggled. Now, they put Detroit in a hole where they became incredibly pass first, but they weren't able to establish the run like they wanted to early in this game. So that was all really impressive. And then, I mean, once the Bills took their 35-14 lead, where like you should just be in cruise control, the game should be over, Lions just kept putting up points on points on points, and you never felt like the Bills were in danger because this was never a one-score game until there were 12 seconds on the clock. Like, the Bills were up 2 scores or more the entire game, but still the Lions were able to keep pace with them and even make up a little bit of ground. I do think the biggest problem for the Bills defensively as this game went on was the secondary, which was super injured in this game. The Bills were down both their starting safeties and Rasul Douglas, and Goff was just kind of picking them apart and taking advantage of some of those weak spots. But we also saw last week, I mean, how they just got embarrassed by the Rams. We saw the Ravens game earlier in the year. Ultimately, I think everybody is flawed. And I think if you look at Kansas City, that defense isn't the same as it was last year. And I think this Bills offense is miles ahead of Kansas City's offense. I really do. You can look at the Lions, but I am concerned about their defense, especially with the injuries they sustained today, which we'll talk about in a second. And you can look at the Eagles and say they're probably the most complete team in football because their defense is elite and their offense is elite as well. They have really great personnel there. But I still have some questions. They had a really good performance today against your Steelers about that offense in comparison to the Bills. I think the gap between Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts is huge, and I do think that that matters in these playoff environments. So it's a very narrow margin, but if you were going to ask me right now, who do I think is the best bet to win the Super Bowl, I do think it's the Bills. I think Josh is playing at such an incredible level. Nobody can will you to a Super Bowl, but if this defense can just hold up well enough for 3 or 4 games, then I think you'll get there. But that is a legitimate question. And we've seen that in several instances. And that's the one thing that you wonder, is that going to hold them back eventually?
Buffalo probably is one of the defenses in the playoff field that I trust the least. I don't trust you guys very much. You guys are just inconsistent, and not trying to nitpick Buffalo. They've played 3 really good offenses and they failed the test every single game. Baltimore gashed them on the ground. Detroit still put up a bunch of points, right? Los Angeles put up a ton of offense, right?
Okay, like, the Chiefs aren't a really good offense. You don't consider the Chiefs a really good offense? They're your Super Bowl favorite. They got to be really good at something.
I mean, you just spent the last 2 minutes kind of tearing their offense down. I mean, I'm
asking you.
Great offense.
They're your Super Bowl favorite.
Patrick Mahomes is great. Yeah, I think collectively they're still my favorite. I trust their defense way more than I trust Buffalo's, but the Josh Allen kind of equalizes everything. I'm glad you shouted out the offensive line. That was the next most impressive thing to me about this win for Buffalo is they held up against Detroit. Detroit, even though they're really battered, and that's the other thing I wanted to put into perspective about this offensive performance for Buffalo is Detroit's arguably more injured than anybody else in the league right now, especially defensively. They've got over 13 guys on IR that are just defensive players, right? Aiden Hutchinson's out. Alex Anzalone's out. The linebacker that stepped up for Anzalone, Trevor Nowaski's out. Like, they are absolutely tattered right now. And to make matters worse, Aleem McNeil gets injured in this game, and Carlton Davis has been out. And Dan Campbell has officially announced that he doesn't expect either of those guys to return for the rest of the season. So I'm not trying to be a downer on Detroit's Super Bowl chances, but I really think they've shrunk. I don't know if Detroit has enough firepower left. They're so well coached. There's only so much that great coaching can make up for. And I just think with all their injuries, I think they're at a real talent deficit now. And I worry about Detroit. Detroit may slip behind the Minnesotas and the Green Bays of the world and Philadelphia to me, just because I don't know how you continue with this kind of, this many guys injured for you. This offense can match anybody, but I really am worried about their Super Bowl chances when, for probably all this year, I mean, Detroit's been my favorite in the NFC. I think that's probably going to change. So I want to put that in perspective with this offensive performance from Buffalo. But like you said, I mean, they're humming right now. And offensively, I wouldn't put anyone above them. I know that Detroit can kind of go. Detroit and Buffalo are close. I really do think these are the two best offenses in football.
Agreed.
So Baltimore's up there too, but I think there's a gap between these two teams and everybody else. And Josh is the great equalizer. Josh has never been my question mark about Buffalo. And that's the point. That's kind of the big point that we've been trying to get across, I feel like, for so long, is he's one of the all-time playoff performers. I still would want Mahomes, but the last thing I wanted to mention about the Mahomes-Allen dynamic right now, Mahomes is off. It's not just the fact that Mahomes purely isn't playing good football. Mahomes has been inaccurate in big situations. He was really inaccurate in this game where he's guys open deep down the field. It's really uncharacteristic, but it's been consistently like this for a lot of the year. And Mahomes has come up in big spots for them, and he has converted third downs, and he has done his thing, right? It's not like Mahomes is playing bad quarterback play. He's playing bad for the standard that Patrick Mahomes has set for himself, just because we've seen how great Mahomes can be. He's not 100% of Mahomes right now. I would give him 85 to 90%, and there's enough of a gap between them that makes Josh Allen, he's playing better ball right now.
Much better.
I just don't trust the defense enough, and that's why Buffalo isn't my front runner right now. But that being said, I think the offense is playing better football than anybody else right now, and like I said, I think Josh Allen is playing better football than anybody else right now.
I understand it. The reason that I might push back is look at who the Bills have beaten in recent weeks. I mean, they went out there and they beat the Detroit Lions. They went out there and they beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Those teams have 3 combined losses this season. 2 of them are to the Buffalo Bills. And the defense has been inconsistent, but it's also had good performances, right? I mean, they played really well against the Niners. They did play pretty darn well against the Chiefs. I understand you having more faith in the Chiefs defense. I would as well. But as we've talked about, it's not the same defense that we saw last year with the regression in that secondary. And for me, the offensive gap right now is bigger than the defensive gap. And I understand if you have just so much embedded faith in Pat that he is still the guy that you want the most. I can't be mad at that. But I also struggle to construct an argument against Josh being the dude you want most that isn't based on a previous version of Patrick Mahomes, right? I mean, if you are talking about this year, I don't think it's close between the two of them.
No, you're exact. It is a reputation. Dude, Josh Allen is legitimately having a glazed face. He's playing perfect football right now, dude. He is. I don't know any other word I'd use to describe it. It is perfect football right now.
Legitimately. The offense is scoring, again, 35 points per game over the last 8 weeks. Why is that? When they've been banged up in that stretch, it's Josh Allen. Josh Allen playing better football than anybody else. And I do think he's played at such a high level in the postseason before, and he's just making better decisions, and he's playing cleaner football than ever, in terms of the regular season by far. So even though we've seen some of those bad defensive performances, and I can't say they aren't a concern, again, everybody's got a concern. Everybody's got a red flag. I like the Bills right now, probably the most in football. I will say, on the Lions side of this, I am also concerned about their actual Super Bowl potential right now. And this was a brutal defensive game for them for all 60 minutes. I mean, they very easily could have let up 59 points in this game, Logan, because the Bills had 3rd and goal on the 1, and then they had a false start call against them at the end of the first half that I actually thought was the wrong call. I thought that the basically swipe of the arm that Osiris Torrance does before every single snap to indicate that it's time to snap the ball got the defensive player to jump. And so I thought that was actually an offsides, but whatever. The Bills end up missing a field goal there because Tyler Bass is just one of a kind win. If they had just lined up for a tush push, I mean, they had 2 plays to get it. That would have been a touchdown. And then later in this game, there's a phantom hold that takes back the most whimsical Josh Allen touchdown of all time when he literally does the chest pass and there was no hold. Hands were inside. That was just a great block. So whatever, it didn't matter for this game, but I'm just saying, you let up 48 if you're the Lions. And let me tell you something, you're lucky to have let up 48 because it could have been 60. You forced 1 punt all game. And as bad as this performance is in a vacuum, the more concerning part is that you lost Carlton Davis in the second quarter, likely for the year. And then late third quarter, I think it was, you lost Aleem McNeil, likely for the year. Those are two of your best defensive players. And the moment that Aiden Hutchinson went down, the question for this team became, can they hang in there defensively? And I wasn't sure. But then you look at what they did. I mean, coming into this week, even without Hutchinson for more than half the season, this was the number 2 scoring defense in football. And they were 4th in points allowed per drive. Like, shout out to Aaron Glenn and the safeties and like the dudes they still did have up front. Anzalone's obviously been hurt and they were still doing all this. But now if you're down 3 of your best defensive players for the year, that worries me enough to where I would view Philly as my NFC favorite at this point, because I still do trust the Lions offense more and I do trust Goff more. And I thought, even though you can look at this second half and say like the Lions were never really a danger to win this game, and like Goff is doing this against a beat up secondary and they're playing a bunch of soft conservative zone looks, which, as we've talked about before, really isn't a good way to stave off a comeback. Like, that's generally how you allow teams to lead, sort of fake comebacks or sometimes even real comebacks, is getting too conservative defensively too early. But Sean McDermott loves to be conservative defensively. You can say that and say, okay, maybe the stat line's a little inflated, but he still played a really good game. Like, Goff was really good in this game. And I think the fact that he was able to put up points like this, shouldering that sort of load as a passer, is encouraging for you. So the Lions offense is outstanding. I mean, it's been historically impressive this year. They're averaging like 33 points per game to the Bills' 32. I just think the defensive gap between them and Philly is now bigger than the offensive gap when you consider these injuries, because they're massive. And the Lions were kind of hanging on defensively, and I think that they've kind of let go of the rope just because the personnel isn't there anymore.
Yeah, their margin is just really closed, right? And Philadelphia has a monstrous defense right now, at all 3 levels.
Incredible.
They're loaded, and Detroit can hang with anybody. I have no doubt about it, right? But that's the difference, is it's going to be Detroit having to basically just track meet the other team. They're going to have to blow by them, just completely outscore them. I just think it's a little too much to ask. I don't like that recipe nearly as much as I like one for Philadelphia. And then, like I said earlier, I'm looking at teams below them now, like Green Bay or Minnesota, where I wonder, they're just nowhere near as beat up, right? I mean, the Packers are down Jair Alexander, but that's one guy, and they've got a bunch of other playmakers. And again, they're so well coached that I can imagine them keeping games competitive, but like, this is the absolute worst it's going to look, because you're running into the juggernaut that is the Bills offense and the beast that is Josh Allen. I think that's important to contextualize, but they're vulnerable now. They're really, really vulnerable in a way that I don't think the other contenders in the NFC are. And Philadelphia has now moved in. They are my front runner in the NFC.
Yeah, it's also a really tough matchup schematically for the Lions defense, because they're like the most man-heavy defense in football, basically. And Josh is just a destroyer of man coverage because of what he does with his legs, because of his ability to extend plays, and you're more vulnerable to scrambles if you're in man, and there's just more time for him to break those plays open, and like somebody's going to win one-on-one eventually. And I thought that you just saw that over and over again. So it was very, very rough defensively for the Lions. I did see somebody in the chat mention Campbell's decision to go for the onside kick early. I was completely fine with that decision, and I'll tell you why. First of all, actually, Jake Bates is clearly just nasty at onside kicks, because both of those were tough recoveries for the Bills. Like, I understand Mac Hollins ends up almost returning it for a touchdown, but he had to tip that ball to himself, and like that kicked up really high. And then at the very end of this game, like Taron Johnson, I think just ended up with that ball out of like the scrum. I don't think that he recovered that cleanly at all. So they were tough to field. But the bigger thing is the Bills were scoring a touchdown every single drive. So you are, again, just scoring every time down if you're the Lions, but you're not making up any ground. So if I can choose between, let's say, with Jake Bates being a nasty onside kick machine, let's give them an inflated chance. Let's say it's a 12% chance of recovery. If I can get that, and if I don't get it, well, then the Bills might score a touchdown in 5 seconds, as they did. I'd much rather they score in 5 seconds than 7 minutes, because if they score in 7 minutes, well, that's just less time for me to find my way back into this game. So I was okay with that risk, because I think you just had to try to get yourself the ball because you weren't getting stops. You didn't have a prayer at getting a stop. And again, I'd rather the Bills score fast than score slow in that situation. So I was fine with it. I didn't think it was consequential in this game at all.
Oh, no, and I thought it was the right decision by Dan Campbell. I stand by most of the decisions. Most of the fourth down stuff that he's done this year, I stand by. Most of the in this situation, I completely agree with. And I just don't like the onside kick rule in general. I think it's dumb that you have to declare that you're going to do it. But no, I think it was the right call.
I think so too. So I had these two teams as my top two teams in football.
Mm-hmm.
I do think the Bills are my number one now. I do not think the Lions are going to be in my top two anymore with the injuries that they've sustained defensively. But again, I mean, you look at the last 4 weeks, and I think that the Bills have the 2 wins of the season. And I think that's really encouraging for the level that they're playing at, even though last week was rough defensively because they've got those couple of wins, and offensively, they're just on another planet. Let's talk about the other biggest game of the day on paper, Logan, which involved your Steelers taking on the Eagles, the battle of the old Steagles. They've betrayed each other. They've split up after that beautiful 1943 season when they aligned to form the Steagles. What did you take away from this game?
You know, I don't know if this like cements to people that the Steelers aren't Super Bowl contenders, but to everybody that's been like the Steelers are a really complete team top to bottom, do you feel that way after this week? Like, they're without George Pickens. And I think it's obvious to everybody on the planet now that the Steelers desperately need George Pickens out there, that he is, in my opinion, one of the best wide receivers on the planet and a game changer for this offense. But they were legitimately incapable of moving the ball on this Philadelphia defense. We see continued struggles in the red zone with Russell Wilson in the offense, and we were severely limited without George. Now, they were in this game. This wasn't a blowout like the score suggests. The Najee fumble seals the Steelers' fate. Like, once Najee fumbled that ball, the Steelers are down 20-13. They're marching. They need this touchdown to keep pace with the Eagles. Right after that fumble, that pretty much ended the game. And so, yeah, my 2 big takeaways, one, are the Steelers desperately need George Pickens on the field. I think that's been obvious. Like, there's just nobody else that is that caliber of a playmaker on this offense. And then 2, they're just, the offense isn't as good as I think everybody has been trying to crack it up to be. And that's what I've been saying, is they're not a good red zone offense. And when we look at these teams, look at Philadelphia. I mean, they have, in this game, at least 3 guys that are just head and shoulders above anybody else the Steelers have offensively. And that's what killed them. Nobody can guard A.J. Brown one-on-one. He was killing Joey Porter Jr. as good as Peasy's been this year. Our number 2 corner can't cover Devontae Smith. And I'll give them credit. We neutralized Saquon Barkley in this game. The one thing that really impressed me about the Steelers again in this game, there's no team in the NFL that is better at limiting rushing quarterbacks or quarterbacks that can create with their legs than Pittsburgh. They also have a rock-solid run defense. The entire game, I was asking myself, where is Saquon Barkley? Like, they had Kenny Gainwell get a bunch of burn in this game. I legitimately wondered where Saquon was at points during this game. He just disappeared. But Jalen Hurts had maybe his best game of the year. He was carving us up. And it's because we had no answer for A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And that speaks also to the validity and how dangerous this Eagles offense really is. When Hurts is clicking, there's no holes in this offense. They have an elite offensive line. They have elite skill position talent. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are one of the best wide receiver tandems in football. And against most defenses, Saquon Barkley is Offensive Player of the Year, on pace to beat Eric Dickerson's single-season rushing mark, right? This is a juggernaut. Those are my 2 takeaways. The Eagles are a freaking juggernaut. They are my NFC frontrunner now. And the Steelers are kind of phony. And again, they can win a playoff game. They need George Pickens healthy. Like you said last week, Carson, the Steelers need God without George Pickens. Mike Tomlin can give all the speeches he needs. The best route for Pittsburgh is to get everybody to go to the church and, just say a prayer. So I hate saying that about my Steelers, and I think they can win a playoff game. It depends on the matchup. If they drew Houston, they can win that. If they drew Los Angeles again, I think they can win that. If they drew Baltimore in Pittsburgh, that's a game I think Pittsburgh can win at full health. But when we're looking at them, against a Josh Allen again, against a Patrick Mahomes. And we'll see. The Chiefs and Steelers are going to go head-to-head very, very soon here. I just don't think they hold a candle to that caliber of team. And that's not a knock on Pittsburgh. They've improved from where they've been. They haven't been able to win a playoff game. They haven't been in contention to win a playoff game. They've now elevated from that group that they were in. They are in playoff contender tier. But as I've been saying for weeks now, I firmly believe that they are far away from the Super Bowl contender tier.
I would have to agree. I also think it is brutal to be down Pickens for a team that desperately needs that sort of top offensive weapon because they just don't have it anywhere else. So this was a really, really tough offensive show.
Not to cut you off, man. There's one stat that cracked me up. I think 4 drives or 5 drives into this game, the Steelers had 0.1 yards per play. It was ridiculous.
It was brutal. It was brutal. I mean, didn't they have 11 total yards when Philly had like 200?
Yeah.
I remember I flashed that graphic up at some point. Philly's defense is incredible, and so you have to factor that in. I mean, they're number 1 in yards per play allowed, and especially since their bye 4 games into the season, they have been the best defense in football. I mean, Pittsburgh is right up there with them, but especially since the bye, because they weren't quite as impressive before then. What they've gotten out of the secondary with Mitchell and DeJean, the defensive line has been better. Like, they're just a force to be reckoned with. But yeah, Pittsburgh desperately needs George Pickens on the field. They couldn't run the ball in this game. They just didn't have any high-level offensive weapons. And obviously, Russ is not going to be able to overcome a situation like that. So that's the core limitation of this Steelers team. It is their offense. I think it's an average offense. It looked like a bad offense today. I don't think it is. I think that's a combination of being down Pickens and facing this defense. But I do think it's a mediocre offense. And as we talked about last week, right, maybe on the back of their defense and their special teams and hitting a few shot plays offensively, you can pull off an upset. How are you going to string together multiple when you're facing these offenses that just have so much more firepower? It's hard for me to see with Pittsburgh. So I do think this game was a bit telling about their ceiling. Not surprising in that way, but telling. It showed you those limitations. For Philly, I do think this is a great win, though. And I think particularly the way that they won is meaningful because Jalen Hurts was so good and because he was so good specifically as a passer. And major storyline of this past week after their very underwhelming game against the Panthers was this passing attack, because Hurts held on to the ball extremely long last week. He missed some open receivers. He took some sacks that maybe he didn't need to. And the offense really just had no pop against the Carolina Panthers. And they come back and they have their best passing game of the season. And I thought that Hurts was super efficient. I thought they were able to get him some more quick hitting stuff, some quick short throws, but I also thought that he was able to hit on some more intermediate throws over the middle. I thought it was a creative game plan from Kellen Moore. I thought he was scheming guys open effectively. And I thought it was just big to see both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith eat in a game like this, because there haven't been many games this year where they've both gone off. And we know that this is one of the most dangerous receiving tandems in football. So that's kind of been the only question about this entire team, is what level of Hurts are you going to get as a passer? Because we know that defensively, the secondary is excellent. The defensive front is excellent. They're incredibly well coached. Offensively, the line is as good as anybody in football. The receiving talent is excellent. Saquon Barkley has been the best running back in football. Like, it's just been the question of, can they win in multiple ways? Can Hurts put you on his back for some big drives through the air? I still think that remains as a question for this team when we're talking about them in those sort of elite Super Bowl conversations, because you're going to face quarterbacks who are significantly better than Jalen Hurts in that run. But again, this was an encouraging response, and I thought that their line was really quite impressive against this Steelers pass rush and this Steelers defense. I know that Hurts ends up taking 3 sacks, but that was still with an average time to throw of 3.3 seconds in this game. So it was down a little bit, but that's still a pretty long average time to throw. And eventually, if you're facing a pass rusher like TJ Watt, he's going to get home. But I thought that Lane Johnson did well in that matchup. And I thought that it's an entire group of ferocious pass rushers that Pittsburgh has. And Philly weathered that storm pretty well. It's just such a stabilizing factor that they have with that sort of dominance in the trenches. And you saw that in this one.
Yeah, and it's also encouraging, like you said, that Saquon Barkley doesn't get going in this game, and it really doesn't matter. The Eagles' offense kind of went off without a hitch, and Hurts carried the offense in this game. The Steelers now have not won in Philadelphia since 1965. I thought that was a ridiculous stat. Obviously, they don't play terribly often because they're not in the same conference, but still, that's as
and
much
because they don't want to see the Steagles go up against each other because it's just a little bit sad and brutal.
Dude,
you wonder where did it all go so wrong?
Exactly. They came together and had something glorious for a little bit there, man.
I know. Back in 43, during wartime, nonetheless, when the country needed it most, the Steagles emerged.
But you shouldn't be resentful that it it didn't last. You should just be happy that it happened.
Exactly.
That's the big takeaway. The Eagles are my favorite. I'm really excited. And like you said, it all comes down to Jalen Hurts, and there are still quarterbacks even in the NFC that I think I trust more. I would take Goff over him as much as flack as I've given Goff, just because he's getting MVP hype where I don't think he belongs with the Allens and the Lamars of the world. I would still take Goff. I would still take Jordan Love over him. But again, there's so much aggregate skill with Philadelphia. That's the advantage that they have. That A.J. Brown is a monster, man. Like, he wins against anybody. Devontae Smith can do that any given day. Like, I think the Eagles are loaded, dude. And it took them getting some good coordinators in this year, but you got to tip your cap to Vic Fangio and to Kellen Moore for stepping in here and turning this team around. It was never a question of talent, of ability. They've always had that, but they really put it together. And I think I would, man. I really like Minnesota, Carson. I really like Green Bay. Everything's clicking for Philadelphia. They're hitting their stride at the right time.
Do you like Minnesota more than a Detroit now? Because, by the way, that division's up for grab. Those are two loss teams, and they play, I'm pretty sure, week 18, final week of the season.
I think it's going to come down to that. That's I don't know if I have an answer, man.
I think it's very close. I think I still trust Detroit's offense more for sure, but I also think that Minnesota is definitely the more complete team. I think I'm still going to lean on the side of Detroit right now because I do think their offensive formula is so reliable, and I do trust Goff more than Darnold still. But we'll see how that defense looks without Aleem and without Carlton Davis, because it might be rough.
It's the cop-out answer
between those two teams.
It really is probably how much defensive help they get back, man. That probably is going to make all the difference.
Yeah.
Well, right now, I will say, to wrap this up, I think I would. I'd probably put Detroit third out of those teams, man. And it kind of hurts me to do so, but they're not a complete team right now, man.
That's fair. No, I think that's totally fair. I think it's very close. We'll see how Minnesota looks against Chicago tomorrow night. That'll be a fun game. But you mentioned Goff in the MVP conversation, only to say that he doesn't really belong there alongside Josh and Lamar. And I think you and I can agree MVP is a two-man race. It's been a two-man race. People have tried to put Saquon in there. Don't think there's any argument that Saquon is nearly as impactful as these two elite transformational quarterbacks. Like, as great a year as he's had, and I think he's made their offense better. They averaged more points per drive 2 years ago when they had Miles Sanders back there, and they were actually a more efficient scoring offense last year with DeAndre Swift than they have been this year with Saquon. Like, it's nothing against the guy. He's incredible. A running back just is not nearly as impactful as a Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. So it has been a big talking point because both of these dudes balled out today. Lamar had 5 touchdowns, more touchdowns than incompletions against the Giants. And of course, we've already glazed Josh for his performance. Where are you sitting at right now with that conversation? Who's your MVP today?
I would have 3 guys, and at this point, here's my rationale on it. If you are open to giving it to any person and you want to give it to the winningest team, I said this, if you want to give it to a Detroit Lion, I'd give it to Penei Sewell because he's the best player on the Lions.
Oh, he wants to be quirky. He wants to be zany.
But if we're being real about this,
he wants another Mark Mosley.
The most valuable position on the field is quarterback, and so I think it's important that we give it to that guy, unless somebody has such an overwhelming season, right? Like an 87 Jerry Rice, where you have 22 TDs and 12 games, and it leads to you being the best scoring offense in football. I'm not saying it's impossible, because there are situations where I would be like, wow, that was such an overwhelming year from that position where you could win it, right? I think any position should be up for it. But in most years, and in this year, I think it's obviously quarterback, and I think offensive player of the year should be reserved for the best skill position player, and MVP should go to the best QB. So I would have it as a 3 quarterback race, considering the team success of the third guy he's eliminated. That's Joe Burrow. Burrow has been playing that well, though, and I don't really care about the individual record, because we do this thing it would be like counting Jokic's minutes where he's off the floor against him in his MVP argument, in my opinion, if you're going to hold Burrow's defense against him, because Burrow is playing like a top 3 quarterback on the planet. But because he doesn't have the team success, we're going to knock him out. So it really is Lamar and Josh. And Lamar has a crazy statistical argument. He really does. Lamar is number 1 in total yards per game by a quarterback. He's number 1 in total touchdowns by a quarterback, tied with Joe Burrow with 37. He has been excellent.
So is Josh. Josh has 37 too.
Oh, I thought Josh had 36. Does he have 37?
You're not counting the receiving.
I forgot about that. That is true. So they all have 37. And Lamar's been exceptional at protecting the football too. And I always clown on Lamar because he does have a tendency to fumble a little bit more than the normal quarterback. That's partly because he runs more with the ball, so he's going to be prone to getting punched out in the open field more, but also because Lamar does kind of hold the ball like a loaf of bread sometimes. That being said, even his interceptions, I don't think most of Lamar's interceptions this year even his fault. Like, you go back and look at them.
Yeah, I agree.
And they've been off his receivers' hands. So number 1 in yards per game, number 1 in total touchdowns, great protecting the football. His team's also been great situationally. They're the number 3 scoring offense, the number 2 third down offense, and they're the number 1 red zone offense. The Ravens also won the head-to-head battle between them and Buffalo. That being said, I made an argument earlier in the year against Lamar when we did this at the midway point and gave Josh Allen the MVP because he has Derrick Henry in the backfield with him. And I also think that's important to weigh in when we are giving this award out. I would hold the fact that Derrick Henry has Lamar with him against him in the Offensive Player of the Year voting. That's why I would also give Saquon a slight edge. I think Saquon's playing better football. Now, I think that's also in his favor. But to me, Josh doesn't have that advantage. I also think Josh has been better in big moments than Lamar. And I think he has, again, the 2 signature wins of this year. And that matters to me. Lamar came really, really close to beating Kansas City in week 1, and that could have been a signature win. He didn't get the job done. It was very close. They didn't win. Josh beat a lot of people's number 1 team, my number 1 team in the power rankings, the Chiefs. He beat a lot of people's number 1 team in the power rankings this week in the Detroit Lions. So to me, he's got the biggest moments. He's got the most signature wins. So when the numbers are really close like this, that's where I err. And I would marginally give it to Josh. It's very close between these two. I love Lamar. I love Josh. I love both these guys, but I would give it to Josh.
I would give it to Josh too. And at the midseason point, I thought that it was Lamar, but I think that Josh has been playing his best football as of late. And I think that he's started to make up ground in the statistical case. The raw statistical case does still lean Lamar, but I also think he's had some of those huge performances in the biggest games of the year that you mentioned. And I do think that matters. I do want to give a shout out to both these guys because they're both in an incredibly rare club in NFL history right now. They both have more than 35 total touchdowns and 5 interceptions or fewer. There's only 3 other dudes who have ever done that, and it's Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, and Drew Brees. So they've both been incredibly productive in terms of touchdowns. They've both done an incredible job of limiting turnovers. They've both done an excellent job of limiting sacks. Lamar hasn't been quite as insane there as Josh, but he's been really good. They've both been incredible situationally. As you mentioned, they've both been super efficient through the air and on the ground. Like, these are 2 all-time great quarterback seasons that we're witnessing right now, and I wholeheartedly believe that. Lamar does have the better pure numbers, and because of that, I think a lot of people are starting to look at this race, and they're saying, well, it's going to Josh now because of team record, and there are people who think that that shouldn't be the case. I saw our friend Joel from Pick a Side tweet out today, last year Lamar won MVP because of team record when it should have gone to Josh. Josh had the better individual season. This year, MVP should go to Lamar, but it's going to go to Josh because of team record. I actually disagree with him entirely. I thought Lamar deserved MVP last year and Josh should have been second. And I think Josh deserves MVP this year and Lamar should be second. It's very close, but it's not just a matter of team record. I think that there are ways to impact your team success, your team offense that go beyond just some of these raw numbers. Like, for example, there is now a bigger gap between the Bills and Ravens as scoring offenses than there is as scoring defenses. In terms of points per game, the Bills offense is outperforming the Ravens by more than the Bills defenses, which I just think is really interesting. Now, that is not a significant margin in terms of how much greater that outperformance is by. But I think if you were to ask people, oh, well, why are the Bills better? People would say, oh, it's because the Bills defense is so much better. The Ravens defense is so bad. Really not the case. The Bills defense has been a little better. The Bills offense has also been a little better by slightly more statistically than the defense, obviously with the drop off we've seen from the defense as of late. So the Bills have the better offense. And I think when you look at the circumstances, you think about the expectations, the Bills, although I like their weapons in totality, obviously do not have an A-plus superstar alongside Josh Allen like the Ravens do in Lamar Jackson. And I think if you look at some of the adversity that Josh has guided them through, where they have been down key weapons for significant stretches of this season, and they have still been on this absolute tear, right? Like they did not lose a beat without Dalton Kincaid and without Keon Coleman. That's an advantage in Josh's favor, that he is guiding a better team offense in a situation that people certainly expected to be a worse offense than what Lamar and the Ravens have. And I do think the specifics of when some of these great performances occur matter. And that's another thing that isn't reflected in the raw numbers. Like you think about Lamar's games of the year, and they've been incredible. He's put on some master classes. You have the Bengals game, you have the Bucks game, you have the Giants game today. They're incredible performances. The competition is not very compelling. Josh's best games have come against the Rams, come against the Chiefs, and come against the Lions in, again, the two signature wins of the year against Detroit and Kansas City. So that does matter to me. Like the performances we saw from these two today are not the same. Lamar being as efficient as he was against the Giants is not the same as Josh playing a perfect game, guiding his team to score 48 points when they needed all of it against a team that came into today 12-1. And so those high stakes, high leverage performances do favor Josh. So to me, when you consider the full context, I am on the side that Josh deserves it. I'm not mad at all if you think it's Lamar's award. Like I'm really not. He's been playing at such a phenomenal level as well. And I just think this is one of the best MVP races ever. Like I think about this alongside 2021 when you had Rodgers versus Brady versus Josh, 2020 when you have Rodgers and Josh and Mahomes, 2011 when you have Rodgers versus Breeze. They both had historic quarterback seasons. Like to me, those are the big three since 2000, maybe ever, just because quarterback play has been his best since 2000. And I think if this is in that top five, like I think this is a top five MVP race between these two dudes. So it just annoys me because inherently, like a lot of the discourse gets overly negative. And I'm like, dude, what negative do you have to say about either of these guys' cases? Like you're just arguing who you think has been more of a superhero. There aren't letdowns. There aren't flaws to pick at with these guys. And I feel like I see both the Ravens and Bills fan bases doing that and being unfair to the other guy.
The one criticism that I would have about Lamar, and a large enough difference also that I wanted to factor in on this, is I still feel that Josh is leagues above Lamar as a passer. And I think this is the best Lamar's ever been as a passer. Mm-hmm. There are games on tape, and it's not many plays a game because I don't want to blow this out of proportion like it's a bigger issue than it is. There are 2 to 3 throws a game where Lamar will have a shot play on the board that is wide open, and he has missed touchdowns this year where a guy is wide open, streaking over the middle of the field with nobody on him, and Lamar never looks at that part of the field. And those are plays that Josh Allen never misses, that he always seems to make the defense pay for. And then, again, this is a very small thing, but I do think it's important to bring up when we're talking about the MVPs, the best of the best. I've seen that on tape in about 4 games this year with Lamar where he has had a streaking guy down the field, wide open, shot play, TD kind of play that he's just missed, where that's something that I think he needs to work on a little bit more. And just some decision-making as a passer. Again, it's not major because Lamar's gotten so much better. It is still a little bit of a difference for me. But like you said, man, if you have Lamar as your MVP, it's so close. I don't care. And I think this is. I can't think of I don't know, maybe like 2009, Chris Johnson versus like Peyton Manning too. I feel like that was a good race, even though they ended up giving it to Peyton when CJ had the most scrimmage yards all time. There's been some good ones. I think this might be the greatest of all time, though, dude. And like you said, I said this a couple of weeks ago. I do think these are 2 top 10 QB peaks of all time, man, both of these guys. And
yeah,
It's insane. We're blessed to see this, man. But this is an
We are.
all-timer, dude, from two of the best quarterbacks I think ever.
We are. And to me, a two special quarterback race is always going to be more compelling than like any race that involves a running back. Like, I'm sorry. I just think when a running back is in the conversation in today's game, especially more so than historically, probably means that you're having a little bit of a down year from the best quarterbacks. I understand what you're saying with Lamar. I do absolutely trust Josh more as a passer. To me, that's honestly more of a factor when we evaluate these guys as postseason performers than it is in terms of regular season performance. Because you can like look at Lamar's game against the Steelers, say that was a letdown. You could also
that's actually
a game against the Texans,
and that is a game. That is a game where Lamar missed one of those TDs. So I mean,
it's also hard though because like the reason those TDs are open so much for Lamar and Josh both is because of how they stress defenses uniquely, extending plays with what they can do as runners. Like they just changed the geometry of the game. And Lamar's been, in terms of passer rating, yards per attempt, the most efficient passer in football this year. So his statistical case is incredible. I just think Josh is also having, again, one of the best seasons that we've ever seen at the quarterback position. And when it comes down to some of that
padding against shitty teams, bro.
No. He's not doing that. But like, again, a performance like Josh had against the Chiefs, like Josh had against the Lions today, like that does mean more to me than having an equal statistical performance against, the New York Giants. So I do lean Josh. I want to broaden this conversation a little bit though, because you mentioned Joe Burrow. Like, I think we're seeing a really special level of quarterback play at the top of this league. And I don't know if that has gotten its full appreciation that it deserves. Do you think we have ever in the history of the NFL had a stronger top 5 in terms of quarterbacks in the league than we do today right now?
I think there's one era of quarterbacks that could maybe be better, and it's that like early 2010 stage where you have Rodgers, Brady, Peyton, Breeze, and Big Ben. And I mean, I know some people would argue that 5 spot switches out Big Ben for like a Rivers or an Eli, maybe
Ryan, if you're a fiend.
Yeah, Matt Stafford, maybe if you're really out of the box.
Maybe
but
Andrew Luck if you're zany.
Yeah, sure.
There's good depth there.
To me, it's Big Ben. That top 4 is really hard to argue against because when I had my top 10 QB peaks, all those guys were there. And I didn't say this in the video because I thought it would get some backlash, some pushback. Joe Burrow might be like my number 11 QB peak or between 11 and 15. Burrow's not far off. I had Mahomes as number 1. I had Josh as my number 4, and I would have Burrow somewhere outside of the top 10.
Where did you have Steve Young? Just out of curiosity, do you remember?
I want to say Steve Young was top 10. I want to say
I hope he was top 7. I love me a little Steve Young.
I had Mahomes, Rodgers, Brady, Josh Peyton,
I presume.
I think I had Breeze after Peyton, I want to say. And then I feel like I went Steve Young, Marino.
Okay, I love it.
I love it in some sort of order. But Burrow would be next off. And then when you look at a guy like Justin Herbert, I mean, we're just waiting to see it come together for Herbert because we've seen him put up the gaudy numbers. All these guys, Mahomes already has 3 Super Bowls. Josh Allen is number 1 in playoff yards per game and playoff touchdowns per game. Lamar Jackson has the 6th highest winning percentage ever. Joe Burrow, on an ability level, is one of the best pocket manipulators, one of the most accurate quarterbacks, I think one of the best leaders ever at the position, and just one of the best operators in the pocket ever. And Herbert has the 2nd most passing yards through a quarterback's first 5 seasons, only to Peyton Manning. And so, in my eyes, Carson, if it's not number 1, I think it's eventually going to be number 1 with where the resumes of these guys are going to end up. And there's only one crop of quarterbacks that I think you can point to and say it's not. And it would be that early 2010s bunch because it's so loaded. And then I thought maybe you look at the 90s because there's 2 eras you could look at. You could look at like early 90s, late 80s, or you could look at mid 90s, which I think is probably better with Steve Young, Brett Favre, Marino,
Elway,
like old Montana, Warren Moon, Bledsoe. Or again, you could look a little bit earlier. But I think the 2010s are loaded, and that's probably the best competition. But again, with where I think these guys are end up, I kind of lean with today's NFL. I think it's probably the best it's ever been. Would you agree with me? I think the quarterback position is deeper than it's ever been, though, as well. I think this is the deepest crop of talent we've ever had at the position.
That I would agree with. When we look at the top, I think I'm with you. I think this is a top 2 era ever. I do think if you look at like 2012, if we're doing a season-to-season comparison, because specifically, like Lamar has never been better, Josh has never been better, Burrow has never been better. Like all of these dudes are having their best career seasons right now. So if we compare this class at its best that we've seen to any other class at the best, and we go with 2012, I still think I'm taking that group. And I mean, you hit the exact 5 guys. I do think that the 5th spot is arguable, but I would take Big Ben. But it's like Breeze, Rodgers, Brady, Peyton, all those dudes were at their absolute best at this point. And those have got to be among like the top 8 quarterback peaks that we've ever seen. So as high as I am on Lamar, and I think regular season, you can argue him above damn near anybody in NFL history. I've said this before. I think he and Josh, because of what they are as dual threats, are probably the 2 most transformative regular season quarterbacks ever. Just if you think about take them out of their offense, what would it look like? Josh never gets hurt, so we don't see it. It would be bad, though, I promise. But without Lamar, right, I mean, they score 12 fewer points per game. But nevertheless, like everybody who we're talking about from that class, I do think has a significantly better postseason resume. And as good as I think Burrow is, and he is an exceptional pocket passer, he truly is, I don't think that his peak is really arguable over a Breeze or like whoever you would look at and say that guy is 4th out of that group. I do think it's close, though. And like, I want to just shed some light on how incredible all these dudes have been this year. Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, so I think that kind of goes without saying. Everybody else I've got a cool stat for. Josh and Lamar, I already said it, but they are in that exclusive club of 5 guys with 35 or more touchdowns and 5 picks or fewer, and I'm sure there's a bunch of crazy dual threat stats for both of them too, and they're leading historic offenses in their own ways. The Ravens aren't there in terms of points per game, but in terms of yards per play, they have been historic. And 32 points per game from the Bills, it's really special. Burrow has 36 passing touchdowns to 8 picks this year. He's averaging 284 passing yards per game. He's on pace to become the 6th player ever to average that many passing yards per game with a touchdown percentage of at least 6.5 and an interception percentage of 1.5 or lower. So crazy production in terms of volume through the air and an exceptional touchdown interception ratio. That club right now is just Brady, Mahomes, Peyton, Rodgers, and Matt Ryan. And Justin Herbert currently has the 3rd lowest interception percentage in a season by a quarterback ever, with at least 300 attempts behind Rodgers and Brady. So, I mean, they're all in rarefied air in their own rights. At the same time, there are 2 names who appear in every one of those lists that I just mentioned, and they are Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. So I think that I still lean on those guys. But yeah, man, you got to appreciate the talents that we're seeing right now. And we've never seen talents like this before. We've never seen athletes like this playing the position. We've never seen dudes who can move like this playing the position. And don't let nostalgia blind you to that, because when I see people talking down on the product today or the quarterback play today, to me, it's just nonsense. I do think in totality, it's better than it's ever been. And I think in terms of the talent at the top, it's just about as good as it's ever been. But that 2012, early 2010s era, like really, really something else. But right now is something else too.
Yeah, and the only reason I say that too is just because of how high I am on a guy like, I mean, I'm high on all these guys. I think Josh is going to win a Super Bowl one day. I don't know if it's this year. He's so overwhelming, and presuming health will have a lot of cracks at it. I think Lamar should play in a Super Bowl one day and should have an opportunity to win one. Joe Burrow is so great. You know, I don't know where he's going to be if he, bless his heart, if he can get out of Cincinnati and go to a good franchise that'll put a team around him. I think Burrow could be back. All these guys are so talented. So I don't know how they're going to shake out, but like I think Burrow's ability is so special, man. You talk about him and Breeze. That's probably my comp for a guy like Burrow. And they're so great. I think it's them right now.
Pure pocket passers. Right now, he's having the Breeze experience of I'm putting up 28 a night. It doesn't matter because my defense is letting up 30.
And quickly, just to expand on the other point that we made, this being the deepest the quarterback position has ever been, too. I want you guys to think in, let's say, for example, right, like mid 2000s, the 16th quarterback in the NFL, you're probably looking at a guy like a John Kitna or a Kerry Collins or like a middle of the road, like a spot starter, right? A guy that can float you and maybe win you some games. He's going to turn the ball over. He's going to be a little bit reckless, but hopefully he can throw enough TDs to where it balances out. The 16th best quarterback in today's game is probably like Baker Mayfield or something like that. And it's like, holy shit, dude. I mean, Baker is an awesome quarterback.
Yeah.
Baker is almost like a one-man offense right now. He's got the Bucs up near the top of the league in third down conversion percentage, in red zone offense and passing offense. Like, that's ridiculous. That he's a former number 1 overall pick, and that's like league average right now. That's the thing that's crazy to me is it's just never been deeper, man. There's such a surplus of good quarterbacks going around nowadays.
I totally agree with that. We do have a super chat real quick. Thank you very much, Carl, for your generous donation to the Nerd Sesh Foundation. He asked, did we just watch the Super Bowl preview of the Bills versus the Lions, or do you think the Eagles will be there? My Super Bowl prediction today is Bills-Eagles, because I do trust the Eagles defense more than the Lions.
Mine's Chiefs-Eagles, and then I guess, I'd go Chiefs-Eagles right now. Rematch of the Super Bowl.
He sleeps on the Buffalo Bills. No, it's okay. I can't ever be mad about it.
Hey, I'm rooting for it. I'm rooting for it. I would love to see our darling baby boy Josh Allen get to the big game.
Sweet baby boy Josh, he's doing everything in his power. We'll see if the pieces around him can keep it together. We're going to take a quick break. Then on the other side, we're going to very quickly talk about this Sunday night game, and then look at some big picture stuff, give some shout outs after some quick words from DraftKings. It's the most wonderful time of the year for getting in on all the hoops, football, and hockey action at DraftKings Sportsbook.
In the season of giving, we're being gifted college football and basketball, pro football and basketball, and pro hockey too, almost 24/7. So many games every day, so many opportunities to place your first bet. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet.
And here's a gift for all new customers. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Happy holidays from DraftKings. The crown is yours. So the Packers improve to 10-4, Logan. They pick up a win over the Seahawks. Unfortunately, the Seahawks lose Geno Smith midway through this game to a knee injury. He goes to the locker room, does not return. Real quick, what did you take away from this Sunday night game?
I mean, positively for the Packers, it's the most dynamism they've had offensively in the Jordan Love era. And it's been very brief, right? Love really blasted off last season and ascended to a top 10 sort of quarterback level. I mean, it's the reason that I love the Packers is that they can be so balanced in games like today where they dominate on the ground and Jacobs eats. But they're so good at gashing you on big plays through the air, man. That's why I love Jordan Love. That's why I love this offense. He just launches it, and they'll connect on 40, 30-yard bombs, it seems like, all game long. So I really like Green Bay. They've got a big play defense. Not only are they explosive, they're disciplined too. I like Green Bay a lot. I've been like Green Bay, and I don't know if you've been moved by their defense yet. I know you've been a little bit skeptical as this year's gone along about them, but I really think Green Bay is serious. I probably have them above Detroit again with all their injuries right now.
Wow.
Detroit and Minnesota Minnesota and Green Bay both. I just think with how beat up they are. Detroit's closer to like Pittsburgh and Baltimore right now in the standing. Just because of all the injuries, man.
I'm not that far. I'm not going as far as you are because I still think the offense. It's the most unstoppable offensive formula in football. Like the Bills have been the best offense for the last 8 weeks, let's say. But just the fact that you can 9 times out of 10 week to week, just consistently run the ball down teams' throats for 5+ yards a carry and then open up the most effective play action attack in football and just be so efficient in both ways. Like, it's so easy for the Lions to move the football. They're still really well coached. I don't know. I'm worried about the defense. Maybe I'm not quite as worried as you are.
What I'm really worried about is I think Detroit desperately needs that bye. And I think if Philadelphia gets it, that makes a meaningful difference to me.
That's
just because
fair.
I think it would really help Detroit just to have that extra week where they could maybe get some of these guys back. And
they're definitely vulnerable. I want to be clear. Like, I don't know if I could have them in a different tier, even from a Green Bay.
They're not in a
I still
different
think I
tier.
prefer them.
They're not in a different tier. I just think they're the lowest in that tier right now because of their injuries. And
I was saying I wouldn't have them in a different tier above Green Bay, where previously I would have. But
that
now
makes
with the
sense.
defensive injuries, I think they're in that range. I still prefer them, but it's not at all like I would be like, oh my God, how did Green Bay upset them? Like, that wouldn't be a surprise.
Yes, I 100%. That's exactly how I feel. So I like Green Bay a lot. And then for Seattle, I mean, Seattle's fucked if they don't have Geno. I think that's obvious. Sam Howell was not leading you to do anything. And I really like Seattle, man. They've come a far way because this defense was really far away last year, and they've been inconsistent throughout this year, but it seems like they've really hit their stride. The midseason trade for Ernest Jones has made such a big difference. He stepped up as a real leader here, and they're talented there. This offensive line is so comically bad, though, and that's what we've always said. And I feel like at this point, I probably like the Rams in the NFC West most. Were they in your top 10 of the power rankings this week?
Well, they will be. I mean, we didn't do them this week.
Well, I mean, for last week, were they top 10
when
for
we
you?
Talked
No,
most
we both had
recently,
Seattle.
Yeah, but that was 2 weeks ago. Last week when we talked, I said I think the Rams are the most dangerous. I think they're the best team in the NFC West. They're hitting their stride at the right time, man. They're inconsistent, but my God, they can throw a hell of a punch, and it helps to not have the worst offensive line in football. And if Geno's done, Seahawks are done.
That's where I'm at. That's where I'm at with Seattle.
To anybody who's ever slandered Geno, and I get it, he has a bad red zone pick in this game. I understand. He makes some bad decisions with the football. He also lets it rip, and he's got an accurate arm, and he's got a howitzer, and he is doing so much to overcome the absolute disaster that is this offensive line. And I just am glad that people got a reference point for what Sam Howell looked like in this offense, because I feel bad for the guy. I mean, it was probably a living nightmare for him, but he goes 5 of 14 for 24 yards. He averages 1.7 yards per pass attempt, throws a pick, a bad pick, takes 4 sacks just in the quarter and a half that he was in the game, has a QBR of 3.3, a passer rating of 14. Like, that's what Geno has been saving the Seahawks offense from. So somebody asked in the chat where he would rank as a quarterback. I think he's outside the top 10 because he makes too many bad decisions with the football. He's also in a situation where there's crazy pressure on him to make something happen every play, but like, I couldn't take him over a Baker, who also has a lot of pressure and has been more efficient, turns the ball over, but not like Geno does. I think he's probably somewhere in like that 13, 14 range for me. I'd have him behind Goff. I'd have him behind Kyler. Oh, I would have him above Darnold. Would you have him above Hurts or below Hurts? It's like complete polar opposite situations.
Exactly. That's what makes it hard to gauge. I think I like Geno more than Hurts still. One game does not change what I think of Jalen.
That's fair.
Barely, but it's close. Geno's definitely top half of the league, man. I like Geno a lot.
Geno's really good, but without him, this offense is a complete disaster. So that's my takeaway for them. And I do think the Rams are better, but especially if the Seahawks don't have Geno, then their season is over. And honestly, we can't write off the Cardinals in the NFC West race because they go Panthers next week. I mean, they had an easy game against the Pats this week, but then they do have to go to LA and face the Rams. And I think I'm picking the Rams over anybody else in that division in a head-to-head matchup right now. But head-to-head matchups are going to be big because the Rams still have to play the Cardinals and Seahawks head-to-head. But the Packers are really good. I love their offensive formula. I mean, they just pound the ball down your throat with the run game. right? It's like what we have seen so many times from them. I feel like the playoff game against the Cowboys last year is the epitome of it, where they just establish the hell out of the run and they open up the play action, they open up the shot plays. They can do that at will. And Jordan Love made some big time throws. I mean, he had the one completion to Christian Watson where he also made the great catch along the sideline that was unbelievable. It's a deep group of weapons. It's a balanced group. This game didn't tell us anything that we didn't already know about the Packers, which is that they're a really good football team. And I do think they're at least a fringe Super Bowl contender. We talked about who might win that NFC West. We talked about who might win the NFC North, a couple of interesting divisional races. Let's talk about your division for a second, Logan. Your Steelers, because they lost a little ground in terms of their lead in the AFC North today. Only one game ahead of Baltimore now. Who do you think ends up winning the division?
I'll tell you what, I certainly would rather have Baltimore's schedule the rest of the way. I mean, I knew that the Giants weren't going to help us out this week, so it was imperative that we beat Philadelphia, right? Tommy DeVito and then Tim Boyle were not going to go and defeat the Baltimore Ravens today, no matter what. Baltimore hosts Pittsburgh next week, so that might just decide it, right? And then Pittsburgh, unfortunately, hosts Kansas City and then hosts Cincinnati, so no gimmies the rest of the way. And then Baltimore travels to Houston and then hosts Cleveland. So I expect Baltimore to wipe the floor with Houston and Cleveland both. I don't think either of those teams are very good. And I expect the Steelers to probably lose to Kansas City, and then Cincinnati and Baltimore are a toss-up to me. I hate giving a cop-out answer. If George Pickens plays, I would take the Steelers.
That's fair.
If George Pickens doesn't play, I would take the Ravens. George Pickens makes all the difference in the world, and you just see it on display today. Like, I like the depth of the Steelers receiving room. I like Mike Williams, but I like him as a number 2 or a number 3. I like Calvin Austin as a number 2 or a number 3. I like Pat Freiermuth as a number 2 or a number 3, right? I like Najee Harris when he doesn't fumble. I like Jalen Warren considerably more than I like Najee Harris, but
preach.
You need your number 1, and the Steelers are such a limited offense. George just unlocks everything for the Steelers. He is a big play threat. He is a home run hitter. He opens up everything for this team, and you just see how comically limited they are without him. So, again, I feel like that's a cop-out answer, but it really is that simple to me. The Steelers need GP.
I honestly think I agree. I think if Pickens plays, I slightly prefer the Steelers, even though I think Baltimore is a more dangerous team in a vacuum for sure. Their head-to-head matchup is massive, much like the low taper fade meme. So that's going to be crucial. I kind of just have a feeling, though, man. I kind of just a gut feeling that the Steelers are going to get one of these games against Baltimore or Kansas City. I don't think they get both, but I think that they get one. And that's big because they have that one game lead. Maybe Baltimore slips up against Houston. Realistically, it's probably whoever wins that head-to-head game. But Pittsburgh does have more margin right now. And they just have an incredible ability to steal games, man, and to win games on the back of that defense. The offense is really bad without Pickens. But if they have him, I think it's enough.
I mean, even in this game, dude, the crazy shit that happens in Steelers games, the TJ Watt forced fumble, the Cooper DeJean muffed punt that the Steelers
back-to-back drives. That was on back-to-back drives.
Exactly. That the Steelers don't convert into points off the TJ Watt. We had to get the punt, and we still only get a field goal out of that one. Classic Steelers. But freak stuff does happen in Steelers games, and it almost happened in this one. They just can't. Najee's fumble changed everything in that game. So I still think the Ravens are the more dangerous team when it comes to a playoff setting, and they certainly scare me more. Steelers are still scary with George, man. But
it's also going to be huge if Mahomes plays against you guys on Christmas.
Fair. That's fair.
How do you think they should handle that? Because obviously we don't really know the specifics. We know the MRI came back negative, so it's nothing major with his ankle, but they've described him as week to week right now. They've got the 2-game lead for the 1 seed right now. And their remaining schedule is Texans, Steelers, Broncos. They play the Texans on Saturday, so it's a little bit of a short week. How would you approach that situation?
Well, and then they've kind of got a short week against the Steelers, right?
They do.
They
totally do.
And the Steelers have a short week too because they're also playing on.
They play
Christmas.
Saturday and then Wednesday, so they've got 2 games in the next 11 days.
Exactly. So it's not ideal for either team. They obviously felt comfortable enough today playing Wentz. It's against Cleveland, so it's a little bit of a different dynamic there because it's the Browns. But if he's not 100, I don't think it's worth playing him. I would just roll with Wentz and see if you can pull off an upset against Houston down Mahomes. If you lose against Houston, though, I think you got to put Mahomes out there regardless. But I wouldn't, with the lead that the Chiefs have, I wouldn't be quick to rush Mahomes back if he's not ready to go.
I agree. Obviously, it's 3 relatively tough games remaining, right? 3 teams that are very, very likely going to be in the playoffs. So sitting Mahomes could cost you any one of these games very easily, but you got the 2-game lead, man. You got the 2-game lead. You don't have the tiebreaker over the Bills, which is important to point out. And the Bills do have a really easy closing slate. They just kind of went through their really tough run of the schedule, and now they get the Pats twice and the Jets. So you expect them to win out. I just need Patrick Mahomes to be healthy if I'm the Kansas City Chiefs, and I'll take my chances on losing a little bit of ground for the 1 seed because I don't think they're going to lose the 1 seed. And even if they did, priority number 1 is keeping Patrick Mahomes healthy. But also, it's like you say, okay, if he's really week to week, you sit him against Houston. If you lose to Houston, then you can say, all right, well, after 11 days, he probably is good to go against Pittsburgh. We don't know the specifics, but I would tread on the side of caution because obviously he's so vital to everything for them. And it's so much bigger than your next 2 regular season games. Wentz is also a really good backup who I think can go out there and win you games. I think he and this defense and this coaching staff can win you games. So I think that's important to point out as well. Give me a shout out of the day, Logan. Somebody who we haven't discussed who balled out today who you want to show some love to.
I know they only put up 20 points today, but I want to give a shout out to Jaden Daniels and the Commanders offense, man. I think that I guess the hype train has cooled down a little bit on Jaden just because they're not winning by astronomical margins now. And it's not the greatest rookie quarterback campaign ever, but what he is still doing is so special. Mm-hmm. He's completely turned this offense around. He is still one. When we're talking about those top 16 guys too, another one of those guys that I might still consider above a guy like Geno, probably in that mix, is Jaden. Mm-hmm. Jaden's special. Jaden is super special, and it's still the case. And Washington's not like a real threat in the NFC to me, mostly because of their defense, but their offense is still among one of the best in the NFL. They are a top 10 scoring offense. They are a top 10 passing and rushing offense. They are a top 10 third down offense, and they're a top 10 red zone offense. Like across the board, they don't really have any holes. And when you look at who is most responsible for that, it's Cliff Kingsbury, but most importantly, it's Jaden Daniels. And oh my God, dude, you give Terry McLaurin an above average quarterback, and he's suddenly one of the best wideouts in football. I think Jaden has like 20 or just under 20 passing TDs this year. I think McLaurin has 12 of them, which is ridiculous.
They've got quite the connection.
They really do. And Jaden today, over 220 passing yards, efficient, controlled, over 60 rushing yards. With how great the top of this QB, like the top 5 QBs in the league are, I don't know if Jaden's ever going to reach that level, but I wholeheartedly expect him to be top 10 one day and to be a guy that you can go on a run and win a Super Bowl with, a guy that is going to lead you to be a top 10 offense every year if Jaden can stay healthy. I think he's such a talented young quarterback. And I know they only put up 20 points today. Jaden's still running the show, and he is basically their entire offense today.
And he made some incredible plays evading pressure with his legs. He had a beautiful, beautiful throw. I'm going to take a moment to talk about Bo Nix. He's not my shout out of the day.
Man, I knew you were going to do this,
okay,
man.
Can I tell you why, though? Because I've been checking in on the chat periodically, and it's killing me. Because damn near the entire time it's been about Bo Nix.
They love him.
Supernova
they love him.
Oh, man. I mean, we've got the Brady comparisons back. I'm loving it. because Bo Nix had 3 horrible interceptions today. But to be fair, Supernova points out he did have a tummy ache because he had eaten at Elway's Steakhouse the night before, so he wasn't 100%. Fake ass offensive rookie of the year debate. All right, can we run down the numbers compared to Jaden? This is a pro Jaden thing. It's not an anti-Bo Nix thing, but listen, we have to give respect where it's due and not overhype those who haven't played at the level. I mean, the team offense obviously is way, way better for the Commanders. Okay, we understand that. Let's go number by number. Total yards, Jaden Daniels. Total touchdowns, Bo Nix by 2. That is the one advantage that he has. Yards per pass attempt, it's Jaden Daniels. It's not close. Passer rating, it's Jaden Daniels. It's not close. Turnovers, Bo has 11 interceptions. Jaden Daniels has only 6. Obviously, Jaden is much more efficient as a rusher. I mean, the guy's just a much better football player. And I hope that we can all understand that. Bo, shout out, he got them a win. But he also had 3 terrible interceptions. But again, he did have the stomach ache that he was dealing with. So, you got to acknowledge that because, of course, he ate at Elway's Steakhouse the night before. Logan, maybe that upsets you a little bit of Bo criticism, fair, founded criticism. I think my shout out of the day will make you happy to offset that, but go ahead.
I'm glad we got that out of the way because I thought he was going to be your bozo of the day.
He's not my bozo of the day. He got the win, and I thought that he rallied. I mean, he still averaged under 4 yards per pass attempt in this game. It was a bad Bo game. 15 QBR, my goodness. My shout out of the day, though, is your shining, quirked up white boy Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. I'm giving it to them in tandem because I thought that Baker was phenomenal in this game. Just throwing ropes over the middle, totally outdueled Herbert and just shredded the number 1 scoring defense that we all know is not the best defense in football, isn't in that conversation, but is a good defense. And Baker was just incredible against them, and he made a couple really nice plays with his legs too. And Mike Evans, Logan, even with the missed games, the 1,000-yard streak is not out of reach. I think he has to average 83 yards per game over the final 3, and he could have his 11th straight 1,000-yard season. Incredible longevity. I love Mike Evans.
Tying the most ever with Jerry, right? Or the most consecutive?
I think so. I couldn't remember if he would have the record outright if he does that or if he ties Jerry.
I think he's trying to tie Jerry if he does it this year.
Incredible. Incredible. Anytime you're mentioned alongside Jerry Rice, huge. By the way, my second shout out, wide receivers from the 2014 draft class, because Devontae Adams was also firing me up today. And he balled the hell out. So shout out to the old dudes. I love seeing the vets getting it done. I'll ask you one question, actually, about Denver, because they got a win today. Also, bozo of the day, shout out to Jonathan Taylor for dropping the ball on the goal line.
Bruh.
Touchdown. Can't believe that still happens. Truly can't believe it. So Denver wins. LA loses badly. Denver now has the better record. Does any part of you, as a Bo Lever, like Denver more than LA as a playoff team now, as a wild card threat?
I mean, not really. Liking them to win a game. In no world would I pick a team with Bo Nix as the starting quarterback over Justin Herbert. As much as I love Bo Nix, I wouldn't do that. And I've been impressed. The Broncos defense has been really good, but
it is very good.
So have the Chargers. And I tend to think this is just a little bit of a skid. Herbert and them scare me more. I'd rather play the Broncos.
I mean, it's not even remotely close for me. I just wanted to see how much you were leaving, dude. It's not remotely close. Are you kidding me? If I have to look at Justin Herbert, if I get to look at Justin Herbert because he's a beautiful man, but I have to know that he is opposite me compared to Bo Nix. I mean, that's all the difference right there. Both these defenses are good. The Broncos defense is better, but I don't care, man. It's not nearly as big as the gap between Justin Herbert and Bo Nix.
I'm also, lastly on the shout-outs of the day to Baker Mayfield, I'm just disappointed that I didn't believe in the Bucs and my baby boy again this year to pick them to win the division, man. I should have known.
Well, they're in a good position now. Falcons get the Raiders tomorrow, so that's probably going to be a win for the Falcons. You would think that they could stop their skid. But, I mean, the Bucs will still be up a game, even if the Falcons do win.
Exactly.
So Baker's a dude, man. I mean, he is having a hell of a season.
Baker's a legitimately good quarterback.
Baker Mayfield this year, dude. Over 3,600 passing yards, 104 passer rating,
Let him know.
7.8 yards per attempt, 32 touchdowns, 14 picks. Sure, he likes to throw a pick every once in a while. That's what makes it fun. He is slinging that rock. And it's been really, really fun to watch. All right, bozo of the day, Logan. Who's your bozo?
You took one of mine. Just the guys that Jonathan Taylor is one. Also, Jordan Battle. I don't know if I've seen it happen twice on one.
But that
Sunday.
was weird. That was weirder because he just lost the ball. He didn't drop the ball.
Yeah.
He just started doing a juggling routine on the goal line with no pressure whatsoever.
I just don't get how it still happens, man. And we've seen it earlier this year with the Jets guy. And then the other guys, I mean, just do your damn job. Tyler Bass. Like, dude, I'm not surprised.
To be fair,
what?
It was a 24-yarder.
I mean, I'm
for Tyler Bass, that's tough, man.
Carson, me or you can make that extra. Like, we can make.
I don't think I could. I don't think I could. But,
I think you could.
We do see it on College Game Day. What are they? They're making 30-yarders on College Game Day. Kids do that.
Dude, a 24-yarder is so short. Like, I think you can make that kick.
I've never been great at kicking.
Neither have I, but I think we can make that.
I don't know. But Tyler Bass certainly couldn't.
So he bricked one. Harrison Butker bricked one badly. And Anders Carlson also bricked. I mean, chip shots. All three of these guys. And you're cutting Tyler Bass, right? Like, Tyler Bass is no longer on my team.
I mean, I would, yes, but I've been saying that forever.
How do you not cut him after missing a 24-yarder, bro? That's a cuttable offense to me.
It should be, but wouldn't you say that missing like a 45-yarder with the season on the line when you've been bad?
Again, he still wouldn't have a job to me, bro. He'd be a
2 playoff
free
games.
agent.
It's crazy. I mean, you think about the biggest games of the year. He missed an extra point against Kansas City. He missed a 24-yard field goal today. Luckily, neither of them mattered. But that's scary. I mean, I talk about the defense being the big question for the Bills because it's a whole side of the football. But I have no faith in Tyler Bass to hit a big kick. No faith whatsoever. He's one of the worst kickers in football. No debate. So are those all your bozos?
Oh, yeah. Just dudes that, I mean, it's the kickers who I cannot believe. I've never seen this many missed chip shot field goals.
What happened, dude? I swear to God, we got off to the greatest start of the year ever from kickers, where like 5 or 6 weeks in, they were 90% collectively from 50-plus yards, and it was like, oh, my God, the kickers have just evolved. They're too good now. Brandon Aubrey is clearly some sort of Soviet invention who was sent over here just to be a kicking machine. Jaime Fairbairn can't miss. Younghoe Koo can't miss. Now all these dudes are missing like crazy.
Chris Boswell is still on pace. He is on pace right now to break David Akers' single-season field goal made record, though, which is ridiculous. Wow. I think he's got
a bit of a mixed bag for the Steelers.
It's not a good thing. It is not a good thing whatsoever. He is awesome. I think 39 this year. I think Akers with the record is 44, if I'm not mistaken.
How about that? I'm doing some quick maths.
Yeah, I think Boz made 2 field goals today.
So last year, kickers were almost 86%. That was basically the exact same numbers the year before. This year came into today just over 83%. And guys are definitely attempting harder kicks than ever before. But I'm telling you, there's been some bad misses this year. Tyler Bass is at the forefront of that movement. Tyler Ass, as I like to call him. But if we win a Super Bowl with Sean McDermott and Tyler Bass, I mean, give Josh a statue immediately.
Bro, yeah, and please don't, whoever made the D Wade one, y'all just like, can we get somebody who can actually make a statue?
Guy. Yeah, and let's do it like old ancient Greek style, you know?
How about we put like
or we could get Michelangelo. He had a great appreciation for the male physique.
Yeah.
You got to get somebody like that on it, the modern day Michelangelo.
I was going to say, let's just build like the Lincoln Memorial with like Josh in a big ass chair, but we'll just put Josh's head
on it. What if we built the Washington Monument based on Josh?
Let's build the Statue of Liberty, but make it Josh Allen.
Did you get what I was saying with the Washington Monument? All right, we'll move on. My bozo of the day is Tua Tagovailoa. Just a terrible game from Tua. 3 picks. Last one wasn't really on him. Tyreek kind of got mossed by Derek Stingley. I don't think it was a great ball, but it was basically a 50-50 ball. And Tyreek just got manhandled. But 4 turnovers on the day in total for Tua. Really, really tough, man. I feel for Dolphins fans. Actually, you guys have kind of been dicks about Tua to let them know. You guys have kind of tried to tell everybody that Tua's elite when he very obviously hasn't been. But the resume that has piled up, our friend Joel tweeted out today, I saw this year against teams with a winning record, Tua's 1-4, got 7 touchdowns, 7 picks. This happens every single year in the winter. He melts down every single year when he faces good defenses, good teams. He melts down, and you're paying the guy $55 million a year. I just don't see how you come back from that organizationally. It truly is one of the worst quarterback contracts. That probably doesn't get reamed against enough. Like, Tua gets a lot of hate, I think. But God, it is costly that they paid him. And I pray the Niners look at that with Brock and they don't make the same mistake. Because
oh my God, dude. You read my mind. I mean, that's the exact comp that I would go to. These guys are like sugar cubes, man. You put them in water and they just dissolve.
And horses like to lick them. Yep.
I wouldn't pay Brock because Brock melts down in these big weather games and these big situations. And Tua does the exact same thing. Tua's a really good regular season quarterback, and he can win you probably 8 to 9 games consistently when it's in a dome or if it's a bad team. But you get him off schedule. You get him in a bad weather game, it's over. I agree with you, man. I think the Dolphins will look back and are probably kicking themselves that they did this, man. I just think Tua is very mediocre, and you don't pay very mediocre a lot of money. And unfortunately, they did that, man. It's like paying Bo Nix a $40 million a year contract, man. Come on.
You turn on your boy.
I mean, it's kind of it's kind of the same.
Keep it real. You always have.
Birdie, Tua, Bo, probably in that same boat.
The Washington Monument is an obelisk, which kind of looks like a wiener, like an erect wiener. So we could put a monument up of Josh's erect wiener. Speaking of a lot of money, just rip out the whole city budget for that one. Tens and tens of millions. All righty. Think we're good here. Any final remarks, Logan?
I learned what obelisk meant today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very distinct shape. You don't see it often, but you see it with the Washington Monument. All right, guys, appreciate you tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this one. Hope you enjoyed the football. Let's be honest, the morning slate sucked and the Sunday night game sucked. We had some great matchups in the afternoon slate. For me, the afternoon slate, the 4 Eastern slate. And listen, we're really in the home stretch now. I mean, we're separating the men from the boys, and let me tell you, it's a whole lot of fun. So if you want to stick around with us for that entire journey, make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. You can get all of our NFL reaction shows live. We go right after Sunday Night Football concludes every week. And you can listen to the show across all audio platforms right after. You also on our YouTube channel will see all of our NBA content, all of our full shows, and all of our video breakdowns that we do. Logan also has been doing some film breakdowns on the NFL. So you get all of our video content on our YouTube channel. And you also can follow us across social media. TikTok at NerdSesh, Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. You can see all of our trivia content, clips from the show, graphics from the show, all that good stuff. You can also join our Discord. The link to that is at the link tree across our social media bios. And you can also check out our merch. The link to that is also in our link tree and is at breakingtea.com. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.